Global North-South higher education partnerships, often staffed with the right intentions, but too often fall short when it comes to impact. What lessons have been learned? What needs to change to make those partnerships more equitable, more collaborative, and more effective? And I turn first to Damtew with our first question. What are the wrong ways to go about North-South partnerships? And what are the better ways to develop them?
A wrong partnership is extractive in nature and transactional in practice. Such unproductive acts tend to benefit one group, typically a northern partner, in a kind of excessive and unfair and equitable manner. Control over and decision-making around funding and resource allocation. Unfortunately, he who pays as a piper calls the tune remains the reality. Who owns the data, the publication, the patenting? And Southern academics continue to lament the tendency of the northern partners extracting data information. Typically, agendas are set without typically sufficient engagement, communication, and appropriate consultation between the North and South partners. Is a short-term projects have very limited lifespan and, of course, very limited impact. They have, however, great implications at an institutional level in terms of time, energy, effort, resources as well. Most of these short-term ones do not focus on building infrastructure. It's a kind of domineering leadership role of the global North, and that continues to be a challenge. So the question now is, what are the better ways of partnership?
In the early days of the organization, we made mistakes that everybody makes when entering these types of partnerships without much experience, falling into the trap of typical power dynamics, thinking that if you bring the money, then you can make all of the decisions. And those obviously are pitfalls that don't lead to successful partnerships, don't lead to successful learning, don't lead to successful results at the end of the day. Sometimes the impact can actually be negative. And so there's an inherent tension in a way from the learning and the results. The primary goal, I would say, was the learning experience of the students involved. I've actually witnessed dynamics where, one group who's bringing the funding to do the work says, well, we're bringing the funding, so we're going to be doing the design because we want to be, the ones in charge of designing. And they do that in partnership with local students and local professors in the countries they work. And there is sometimes this negotiation between two professors of engineering who want their students to do the design, one from the US, one from, the host country. This is really just like a lack of imagination, really, because everyone can do the design. And what we discover is that when you actually do that, everyone learns from each other. They're only in opposition in our own minds if we don't take the time to really talk to each other and to establish an equitable partnership.
The one thing I've learned is the fact that for any partnership to be equal, it has to be intentional about it. Many of the things that we've seen over the last several decades, they were never intended to be equal. I would typically sit in my office at the University of Ghana, and somebody will walk in from a UK university or a US university and say, I have this big grant, and would you like to partner with me? And of course, I wanted to partner with him or her. If I didn't do that, it would mean going for several years without a grant. The more we engage, the more opportunity we had for publishing. Without these people coming and saying, I have a grant, can you partner with me? There was nothing happening in many universities. How do you ensure that African researchers can sit in their universities and not have to wait for someone to come and say, I have a grant, would you partner with me? Arua was created as a mechanism for empowering young African researchers so they would have some of the resources, so they would have some voice, some governance experience in going into partnerships. We wanted to establish a system where African universities engaged with their European partners as equals. They asked the questions together. They designed the studies together. They analyzed the data together and wrote the reports together. Today, almost every African university has a well-trained office for managing projects. And this has helped to improve the standing of these universities, has helped to improve their capacity to engage with various external bodies. Today, there's a more professional approach to the management of universities and also other research institutions, making sure that there's an equitable research initiative or partnership requires an intentional approach. The parties must be intentional. It's not going to happen by chance. The Global North has a lot to learn from the Global South, and the Global South has a lot to learn from the Global North. If a partnership is not well structured, they don't learn from each other. What we at Arua did was to go to UKRI and say, look, why don't we restructure that kind of a plan where the proposals that we consider will originate from the Southern partners? And it made a very big difference. So instead of somebody coming from Liverpool to look for a partner in Ghana, somebody from Ghana went to Liverpool and said, look, we are going to UKRI for this grant. Are you interested in partnering with us? And that made a huge difference.
How do you manage risk, build capacity and establish long-term viability in a partnership involving two very different contexts?
The capacity of the partners that we work with is a critical aspect of managing risk. We cannot assess multidimensional risks of the projects that we work with, from Denver, Colorado, where our head office is. And so we simply listen to their priorities and listen to their direction when it comes to where to act. Rural infrastructure is filled with stories of failures, of things that are built without, the proper operations and maintenance and capacity of the communities to even afford it. And so engaging with the community as equals in a partnership that is where the goal of building together is also shared. There's almost like a Russian doll of partnership, success that needs to be built at all levels to make sure that what we do is appropriate, is desired, is going to be utilized, is owned by the communities that we work with.
Thank you, Boris. And Mike, what are the risks involved?
I think it really does get down to relationships, and back to the notion of transactional relationships. We want to stay away from that. We are genuinely, the core values of ABET is all built upon, making the world a better place. Now students are looking at what's the cultural impact, the social impact, will it work in certain parts of the world?
There was always the fear, and the money wouldn't be used properly for that. Today, I think a lot of that has changed or is changing. Most universities today have a research office, a research management office that provides the assurance that the institution backs whatever you're doing. So there's no likelihood of Gates coming looking for how their money has been used and no one there to account for it. Today, that is very much taken care of.
I sit in a number of panels reviewing, research proposals, grants, etc. One of the most common questions that are being asked are, what are the risk issues in delivering in this particular project, for example? A partnership is a relationship, and a relationship always has a risk. You need to invest trust. I think Michael, took the word out of my mouth. Another one is a commitment to this relationship. I think, in my view, there is always that risk that lurks around. You need to have a seasoned leadership. I think it's so important. And of course, the structure we talked about. And it's also important to have frequent, open, and in-person interactions. And it must also be a genuine interest on the part of the partners to understand and appreciate the context, the issues, the opinions of colleagues and partners, the kind of challenges that are already stated in the SDGs.
Back in my day, people cared about, hey, what kind of job can I get? What am I going to work on? How much money am I going to get paid, right? There's still some of that, of course, but there's a whole nother part of, hey, what's my impact of my work going to be on the world, and how can I make the world a better place? I'm inheriting this planet. I plan on being here a long time, and how do I make everyone's life better?
The New World Order, if you wish to call it also disorder, is such that extant forms of partnerships have become obsolete. A new form, a new model of partnerships, we need to contemplate that. We need to spouse that and advance it in the interest of the entire world. I think the global North needs to commit, and not only pledge, which they have, but actually put the money and the resources behind this initiative to research, which is critical and important and key for the partnerships which we are all envisaging. The funding institutions play a very strong role in terms of leadership. Is it going to be led? Is it going to be co-led, or who is going to be the principal investigator? How much of a resource is going to the southern partner vis-a-vis the northern partner?
Once funders begin to think in a very structured way about supporting partnerships in an equitable manner, and let this reflect in the criteria they use for assessing various grant applications and so on, I think a major obstacle will be removed.
For us, it's been really kind of a learning process. We haven't ground-proofed our own partnership structure on kind of any globally established frameworks. The principles behind which we do and build our partnerships needs to be a little bit more explicit, maybe through a policy. Sharing what we learn about establishing equitable partnerships and seeking out kind of frameworks might be an interesting endeavor for the future.
Building truly effective North-South partnerships isn't just about good intentions. It requires trust, shared ownership, deep relationships, accountability, a commitment to co-defining problems and co-defining solutions, and being in it for the long term.